Hello and welcome to Decision NYC from Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Ben Max, your host and the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. I'm pleased to be joined here by mayoral candidate Cathy Rojas, who will be on the Socialism and Lib ballot line, which is short for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Cathy Rojas, thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running for mayor.
So I'm a Queens native. I'm a New York native. I'm the daughter of two Colombian immigrants. I'm a worker. I started working like most New Yorkers at a very, very young age. At about 15, I mostly worked in restaurant industries where I even tried to unionize restaurant workers. I've also worked as a community organizer, as a tenant organizer, and I'm currently a high school history teacher in public education for the Department of Education. I've been an activist for 10 years. And the reason why I decided to run this year specifically is because of everything that we went through and our experiences during COVID-19. I teach in a school that's 100% immigrant students. All of our students are 100% Latino and all of them are recent immigrants. And I was living in Elmhurst, Queens, a few blocks away from Elmhurst Hospital when COVID-19 hit. And, you know, we witnessed really the disregard for life from the government, right? We were in a community that's mostly immigrant, where many people, the only hospital that they had access to was Elmhurst Hospital because it's a public hospital and they knew that they could get a payment plan. This caused for the hospital to be overpopulated, and many people were literally, dying in waiting rooms. When I walked outside of my house, we saw the these trucks that they use as morgues at the moment, right? We saw the food scarcity that our community was going through, the lack of help for undocumented immigrants that made it impossible for them to be able to quarantine. We saw how lack of housing, adequate housing caused many of our kids to be living in houses that are overpopulated with 2 to 3 families, maybe even in one bedroom, we've heard of, which made it impossible for them to quarantine and made it much more likely for transmission to pass. And these are all things that we've been fighting for a long time, right? For access to housing, for access to healthcare, for the opening of more public hospitals, for support for food for immigrant families, right? And we saw how at every level they chose to continue to protect the profit of the rich over saving our lives. And literally, we saw that happening, and we saw the neglect from our government, right? As teachers, we had to organize a weekly food drive for our students because our government completely neglected them. And I think that, seeing literally waking up, taking a walk down the block and seeing how many of my neighbors, of my students' families, of community members were literally, their life was completely disregarded and they were just thrown into trucks when they passed away. I think that made me realize that this is really the moment where we can't take anymore. We can't continue with a government that's going to continue to put the interests of the rich and real estate developers over the lives of the New York City working class. And that's why I decided to run for a New York City mayor.
Now explain a little bit more why mayor. I mean, obviously you're running on a, quote unquote, third party line here. Explain that decision to run for mayor, not to run for city council or borough president, but run for the highest office in the city. What are you hoping to achieve in this campaign, obviously, aside from winning the election? And have you been, we're talking here almost middle of October. Are you, what have you been hoping to achieve in this campaign, and how is that progress going?
So I think that the reason we chose mayor is because we're talking about New York City, one of the biggest, most well-known cities in the entire world. And I think that that COVID-19 showed everybody, all working class people across the world, that the rich will always protect their interests at the cost of people's lives. And I think that we knew that our campaign would get a lot more attention if it was a citywide campaign. And I think that our ideals are not only beneficial for New Yorkers, but for people across the country, working class people across the country. And I think that also our policies wouldn't be necessary. I mean, they would be beneficial in a certain district or in a certain community, but we know that we would have the best impact if we were able to impact them citywide, right? So if we look at our plan for housing, right, to make New York City a rent control city where people can't pay more than 20% of their income for housing, right? In order to seize vacant apartments and give those vacant apartments to people who are homeless. We have more people in homeless shelters and families in homeless shelters than we have vacant apartments. We have more vacant apartments, than we do have people in homeless shelters. So we could literally eradicate homelessness, right? We're talking about taxing the rich, right? And while we know that that's something that we would need state support for, we know that as a New York City politician, we would be able to garner that support if we spoke to the entire working class of New York City, and we promoted a campaign where we showed them what would be the benefits, right, of taxing the rich, of being able to fully fund education, of being able to fully fund the AMTA and make it public if it was properly resourced, right? If we had those resources from the rich.
Most of what you outlined there seems like it would need to happen at the state level to be allowed in the city. Mm-hmm. How is the campaign going? What are you, where do you think you've been able to elevate the conversation? Where has it been challenging? And, how is the sort of political side of the equation going? You laid out some of your big principles there, policy-wise. How's the political side going?
Yes, for sure. So I do just want to say that even though it's on the state level, we know how much power New York City as a city holds statewide. And we are confident that if we have politicians that have those, that are putting the interests of working class people in place, we will be able to put pressure in order to have all of these policies passed. In terms of how the campaign is going, we have been out in the streets talking to people in all 5 boroughs. We have volunteers in all 5 boroughs. And every time that we're out in the streets talking to people, most people are open to our ideals. They are supportive of us. They believe in, rent control, in taxing the rich, in fully funding healthcare, opening new hospitals, funding public education, funding violence intervention programs. These are all ideas that everyone in our city would stand to benefit from.
And so it seems like a lot of these proposals are things that were debated quite a bit in the Democratic primary for mayor. Was there a reason you decided not to enter that primary and try to have a longer campaign and make some more noise sort of on the Democratic side of things?
Well, yes. I mean, I think I'm a socialist, right? Mm-hmm. So I do believe that at the end of the day, through capitalist systems, there will always find the need to protect the interests of the rich, right? And I think that running as an independent allowed me to stay true to our socialist vision that puts the interests of humankind before the profit of the rich, but also I'm still in the race.
Let me ask you, we're running low on time. Let me ask you about at least one more issue, which is public safety and policing.
Yeah.
I assume, given the rest of your agenda and some of what I've read about your campaign, you have a lot of strong beliefs on what should happen around policing in the city. Go ahead.
Yes. So we want to ensure safety for all New Yorkers, but the solutions that are being given by Eric Adams and my opponents are the same age-old solutions of we need more police in order to stop criminality, right? But if we actually study, and we've looked at a 10-year study where only 2% of major crimes are solved by police, right? But then on top of that, when we look at communities that have been heavily policed for decades, we don't see a decrease in criminality, right? Because criminalizing communities, what it does is it really just puts people into jails, and it separates families, it takes away resources from that community, It takes away the political power from that community. And when that person comes out, they come out with trauma. They're less likely to be reintegrated into their community in a positive way. And also, most of the stops that are being made by police, most of the arrests that are being made are for nonviolent crimes, like ticketing street vendors, like we saw in the Bronx, where there are street vendors that were forced to throw out thousands of dollars of fruits and vegetables in a community that's food insecure. So what we are proposing is to reallocate
30 more seconds. Sorry, go ahead.
$6 billion from the NYPD into violence intervention programs that have been proven to work. In the Bronx, they had a reduction of 63% of shootings. They're about mentoring youth, about creating after-school programs, or creating job opportunities, and creating re-entry programs for people who have come back from being incarcerated, so that they're credible messengers and they could become mentors to youth, and they get a job at the same time.
All right. We unfortunately have to leave it there. It's a short interview, but at least gives voters some feel for what you're running on. Catherine Rojas, thank you for the time. Catherine Rojas will be on the Socialism and Lib ballot line, which is short for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Appreciate the time. Good luck out on the trail.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Decision NYC with Ben Max here on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Talk to you soon.